How's it going, everybody? This is Jason Ostrowski, and welcome to another edition of the Everything Real Estate Podcast. In today's episode, we're going to try something a little bit different. You know, we always see the market from an agent's perspective, right? We're out there every day. We're showing properties to multiple clients. We're listing properties. We're in it every single day. But for first-time home buyers, this process is totally new. It can be very stressful. In fact, it can be terrifying. So today, I am going to interview a few of my current clients. They are first-time home buyers. Their names are Jim and Lawren. They are actively seeking a single-family home in southeastern PA with me. And it is a very competitive environment out there. We want to get their take from their perspective on their experience going through the first-time home buying process, the ups and downs that they have felt, the stress, the sense of rejection when an offer is not accepted on a property that they really want. And most of all, I want to hear from them about what we can do better as real estate agents. That's really why I want to have them on the podcast today, is to help us be better for our clients. So let's get right into the interview with Jim and Lawren this week, and we'll pick it up on the other side. All right, we're going to do something a little different on the podcast today, and I kind of wring my hands here because I'm super excited to have my very own first-time home buyers on the podcast, because I think it's very beneficial to get their perspective on how it's been in the process of buying their first home and what they've experienced, not from our eyes and what we see, but from their eyes and what they have seen through this process. And we've been working together for a little while now. And their names are Jim and Lawren, and they were gracious enough to come on the podcast and share their sob story right now. No, I'm kidding. But we have been looking for a little while now. And I think it's going to be beneficial for all of us listening to hear what you have to say. So Jim and Lawren, thank you so much for doing this. Always good to see you guys. How are you?
We're doing well, Jason. It's good to be here to share our story, share some lessons that we've learned.
Yeah, we're really excited to do this and to help everyone else out there who is looking or wanting to look or ready to look.
Now, we've started this process a while back. And I feel like at this point in time, I feel like we're friends, and as friends that I consider us now, it's been frustrating at times, I think, for all of us to go through this process. I really, really, really want to get you a home, and that's kind of like my number one mission. But it's always good to see you guys out there, and I feel for you, going through this, because it's not easy. And so my first question for you is, as first-time home buyers that have never gone through this process before of purchasing a home, and on top of that, having to do it in a competitive environment right now in the real estate market, how have your thoughts and expectations changed since we first started our search together? Let's start with that question. And Jim, I'll start with you.
Okay. I mean, so that's a pretty loaded question with a lot going on in it. My thoughts and expectations have changed pretty drastically over this entire course. In the beginning, I thought that this was still going to be a fairly reasonable process. And at this point now, I'm pretty convinced that it's just going to be win the auction and deal with all the problems later.
That's extreme. That's extreme, man. That sounds harrowing. I do understand where you're coming from. And when we first spoke, all of us, you always sense that it's going to be a process of evolution, right? That your expectations, either in the style of home that you want or just the process itself, is going to be different than what your expectations start out with, right? So, Lawren, how has it been for you going through this as well?
I have been humbled. It's been, we've learned so much about each other and what we want out of all of this, which has been like something that we are really grateful for, but it has been quite the process. And I feel like I went into it kind of with like rose colored glasses. And I was like, this is going to be great. Like, it's going to be wonderful. It's like joyous and fun. And we're going to walk in, we're going to get it home. It's going to be done. And it's not like that. It's been a lot of work.
When we first started, we pulled up Zillow, we looked at everything that was available. We talked to you, we got listings from everything that was out there. Most of it was stuff that had been sitting on the market for a while. We didn't really understand the concept of a house sitting on the market for a while versus something that comes and goes quickly. So you were gracious enough to spend a bunch of time going through a bunch of houses that I assume, looking back on it, you knew we were not going to put an offer in on. And you showed us all these houses that sit on the market and why they sit on the market. And then, so we got that perspective of why things are out there and just a feel for things that sit on the market for a while and things to look out for sure. That's where we learned about, comping out how homes, especially with that log cabin, and just how there's nothing similar to that. And so you could run into appraisal issues. But then we started to see, the coming soons, right? And then it was all of a sudden we saw our first like good house, right, to put an offer in on. And that was just a change in the whole search, the whole process. You were just like, oh my God, there is something out here. Now, at that time, we didn't really have a really well-defined idea of exactly what we were looking for. And we had a rough estimate, but it was kind of the first one of good bones that we saw. And that was exciting. We've seen a lot since then and gone through a lot more that I can get into, but I'm sure you have more questions that I'll address that down the road. But yeah.
Well, let's talk about how, your expectations maybe have changed a bit, right? Like where are everybody makes sacrifices in this process. We talk about and I think you've heard me say this before, the 85% rule. The 85% rule is that when you go out to a property, if one way to clarify if it's maybe worth putting an offer in on a property is the 85% rule. Does that property have 85% of what you're looking for? Because if it does, then most likely it's time to put in an offer, because very rarely do you ever get 100% of what you're looking for, right? So I think it's a good logical way of looking at things. So where, I guess, in your minds, have you learned to sacrifice certain things maybe that you started out wanting or desired, and what has the reality become over time? If I can answer. Lawren, I'll start with you on that one.
I have sacrificed my pool. No, I think for us, we went into it thinking that we were going to be able to find, something that was move-in ready and pretty and like we're just ready to go. And I think that has changed now. We have had to kind of figure out like, okay, we're going to need to rip up carpet, we're going to need to put paint on, we're going to need to change things. So I think we are just sacrificing in general the idea of like something that is move-in ready. We're going to have to put time into anything that we purchase because that's just what's available right now.
So I think we have different tiers of that actually. And it kind of depends. What we've started looking at is how long will this house work for us, right? Mm-hmm. Is this going to be a home that's going to be a 30-year home where we're going to build our entire family? Is it going to be a 10 to 15-year home where we then try to move on when we potentially have teenagers and a larger family? Is it something that we're looking at that can meet our needs for 5 to 6 years, right? And so the longer the home potential, right, for that to support us, I think the more sacrifices we're willing to make. Mm-hmm. Where, if we're looking at a house that's, where we're going to make sacrifices on the size of it, we don't really want to make a lot of sacrifices on, the move-in readiness of it, right? We want it to be pretty move-in ready if we're only going to spend 5 to 6 years there, because we don't want to spend those 5 to 6 years working on it. If it's more of a 10 to 15 year home, we would make a few more sacrifices in terms of the work we're willing to put into it, the money, the investment, things like that, because it's going to support us for a longer amount of time. And I think in terms of like a really long-term home, if we could find one in our price range, which I don't think is very likely. But if that were the case, I think we'd be willing to make, an 80% rule for that, or, even more, right? Because we'd be willing to put in the time, the work, the effort to really make that our home. So it depends on the house that we're looking at. And we've noticed that and kind of categorize them based on the size of not only the home, but the lot itself, as well as to, like where we could potentially blow out a wall or put an addition on, right, to make it a longer home if we wanted to invest in it and adapt it to our needs. So I think it's a bit of a shifting scale, and it's not absolute or resolute for any house we go into in terms of the things we're willing to make concessions on. It's more of a, how do we categorize this home and then, go work from there.
I actually love that answer, because I think that's a great way to think about it. And we've talked about this before. Like, is this a house that you can see yourself living in long term? Is this going to be shorter term? Like we do talk about then, when we go out, we talk about that. But I think that's a great way to categorize it, because you may be willing to put in a little bit more work if you're going to be there for 30 years, right? And if you're not, then it's got to be a little bit more ready to go. And I think that's a great way to approach it and kind of stick to your guns, right? And we have stuck to our guns in certain ways. I feel like, there's certain things that you are not going to sacrifice, right? And the bones being one of those things that if the bones are good, we're pretty good with the house. One house that we recently put an offer in on needed a lot of aesthetic work, but the bones were very good on the property, And so just like you learn what you're looking for in a home, I also learn what you're looking for in a home. And so I think the process becomes easier over time. It's a learning lesson every time we go out. And so, we've come pretty darn close to getting an offer accepted. And unfortunately, we've kind of been in second place a couple times. And I know it's been pretty painful for all of us. And in the end, we've fallen a bit short. But what would you want a real estate agent out there to know about what you've gone through and how we can make it a better process for you, the first-time home buyers? I don't know which one of you wants to start. I don't know if you'll have a lot to say on that one, but Lawren, you look like you're ready to go.
Yeah, I mean, I think that we have been so fortunate to work with an incredible agent.
I owe you that Amazon gift card next time.
No, I do. I think that we, I can't speak for everybody, but I think it, I just think that we are really, really fortunate.
It could be in general too, Lawren, like just what you've seen out there, in your experience when we go through houses. Is there anything that stands out to you and, you're like, I wish this was done a little bit differently, right? I know I'm putting you both on the spot with that, but I think it's important for us as agents to know, like, okay, what do our clients think about the industry? What do they think about agents? Because sometimes agents don't have the best reputations, right? And sometimes there are reasons for that. And so it's always a learning lesson. What can we do better as a whole,
Yeah. So I think the one thing that is probably the most frustrating is that there's a little bit of a lack of transparency with the offer process, right? You kind of put in your offer. A lot of times you're in the dark on, where you stand until the very end. And one thing I'd love to see more of that we have not experienced, unfortunately, is if you are close, if you're at that threshold, right, having that seller's agent come back to you, be like, hey, we like your offer. It's pretty close to another offer that we have. Is there anything you'd like to improve upon that, would put your offer over the top? And I think, because that killed us the one time, we were right there, we were on the cusp, and we get the news that we were right there and on the cusp, and you just sit there thinking, oh, if we'd just done this one little thing differently, but you didn't know because there's no transparency with it and you didn't get a second chance at communication at it. I think that's the thing I'd like to see the most would just be, before the absolute decision is made, a little bit more communication amongst the top parties involved. To try to give you that little extra chance to increase your offer or maybe go, up until, to your very limit, without having to necessarily shell out to your limit on every offer every single time, and be covering really large appraisal gaps and things like that. But also, I will follow up on what Lawren said and say that, we do have a very good agent who does advocate for us. And because I have heard from other people who've been in this process that, they have felt like their agent wasn't necessarily always advocating for them as strongly as they felt that, their agent should be. So we are very fortunate in that respect.
Well, first of all, thank you guys. And that's why I had you on the podcast strictly for flattery purposes, but thank you very much. No, I do think that I agree with you. I think we talk about this a lot, you and I, that my frustration with this market is that lack of communication, let's call it, right? Because I will put in every time we make an offer that if we are close, because a lot of times agents will do what we call highest and best. And we've gone over this process, you only get one shot, yada, yada, yada. But if they don't tell you that up front, you make an offer and you say, you talk to the agent and you say, look, if we're close, please circle back with me. I don't know if there's anything more I can do, but maybe my clients would be willing to do a little bit more if I have that conversation with them. Right. And they say, yes, I'll do that. Unfortunately, that doesn't come to fruition a lot of times. And you're left in frustration as the buyer agent because you're told one thing and another thing happens, right? Now, sometimes, if you get 10 offers on a property, agents sometimes get confused if you're getting a million phone calls, they forget to call you back, this and that. But it really affects people's lives. And I think that I feel your frustration on that 100%, no doubt. I wish there was something that, as a rule of thumb, we could do better in that regard, for sure. That is my number one pet peeve. And I share in your frustration with that. So, I know one frustration, Jim, that you and I have spoken about several times, and Lawren, same thing with you, is, a lot of times in this market, we see people waiving inspections, right? And we always talk about how, I would never recommend you waive an inspection, but, 9 out of the 10 offers on this property, I've been told, have waived inspections. What would you like to do? Right. And the only recourse that we have when it comes to waiving inspections sometimes is looking at the seller's disclosure. And Jim, I know this is a big pet peeve with you, and we've talked about this a lot, is that a lot of the seller's disclosures are not filled out properly. There's a lack of explanation if there is a problem on the seller's disclosure. And we see that a lot. Jim, do you want to speak about the frustration that you have as a buyer trying to glean information from the seller's disclosure and it just not be that good? You're not getting that much from it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you've encompassed all of it right there, right? You're dealing with either, estate sales that are completely blank, so you have no information, and if you're going in blind, right? So that's the worst kind of case scenario. You have absolutely zero information, and then you're still expected to waive inspections, right? And you're just like, all right, so I need to put in a bid on this house, and if I get it, I have no idea what problems could be awaiting me when I do, ultimately end up getting, this offer accepted, right? You can always do an inspection after the fact and uncover them all and, then maybe cry about it. But, or you have a seller's disclosure where it's, again, not properly filled out. People, it's an 11-page document. I understand that people don't want to spend the time reading through it, really spending the time to organize it and write, effectively and communicate what the problems are. But even if they do, it's usually still pretty limited. We've encountered, I think, 2 homes that had really well written seller's disclosures with addendums attached that were very organized. I mean, I feel like this is a very much the minority case where you end up with a seller's disclosure like this. And I've learned now that that is the case where you are the safest waiving your inspections. And unfortunately, we learned that the hard way, because that's the one where I was pretty set on in this process that I was going to have the house inspected no matter what. And that at some point we'd get a house without having to waive our inspection. And this one taught me the hard way, because we came in second pretty much solely because we didn't waive inspections. And, it cost us that opportunity. Now, again, this was a house that had a really well filled out seller's disclosure. It had a lot of information. It had, very, very organized records of everything that was done to the house, things like that. And so that was probably one of the safer options. But, that's very rare case. And so the idea of going into a home and waiving your rights to an inspection to know what you're buying on the biggest purchase of your life is, really unsettling. But, we learned that lesson the hard way. And unfortunately, that's what it's going to take to get a house. And when, you're, constantly fighting this battle to try to buy a home, and, you just want to get into a home, and you want to get started on your life. You want to start building your equity, you want to start investing in yourself. And, at some point you kind of break on that, and you're like, well, I guess if that's what it's going to take to get a home, that's what we're going to have to do. But it's terrifying. You might be dealing with a huge underlying problem. So you have to take then that 1 hour that you get to look at the house and pretend that you're a home inspector. And, you get in all the crawl spaces, much to Lawren's dismay. And, you try to look at every crack in the basement wall and, where water could be coming in, and just doing your own, but it's, you still don't really know. You could bring an inspector with you, and in that 1 hour, you're still not going to get close to an inspection. Right.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just tough. It's disheartening.
It is very frustrating. Lawren, do you want to add anything to that? I think Jim said it extremely well,
Yeah. And just anyone who's listening, just fill it out. Just fill it out. It's just take 20 minutes. That's all. Because if this is the way that the market is going to go, where waiving inspections becomes the new norm, I just think that it's a courtesy to take, 20, 25 minutes to fill out the disclosure, because it's just going to streamline the process. It's going to make everybody feel a little bit better about their wild decision to waive an inspection. It just makes you feel better about an already very, very difficult choice.
It's a liability issue for agents too, is that, we want to, I want buyers to have an inspection, right? I certainly don't aim to have, when you're representing a seller, it's tough because it benefits the seller in a way to have inspections waived, right? But it's also a liability for them, because if they don't fill out the seller's disclosure properly, then the only recourse that a buyer has is to look at that document. And if you have lied on that document, or you didn't disclose something on that document, there is a chance that from a liability standpoint, the buyer could come back after the seller, right? So, I marvel sometimes at the lack of disclosure, right? And we see that through this process time and time again. And Jim, just to follow up on your point about, the inspection, we talked about this in my own house, a couple of years ago in the middle of the pandemic. We buy a property and we have to waive our inspections. And that was the only way that we were going to get the house. Now, I like to think that I have a trained eye, for things. Jim, you have a trained eye in certain aspects on the home as well, with some of the jobs that you have had throughout your life. I knew we were going to need certain things in the house, but we had an inspection after the fact. Like, I didn't get up on the roof and look at the chimney, right? The mortar is all deteriorated on the chimney, and, that's going to cost us X, Y, Z. Some electrical stuff that, I don't have a trained eye necessarily for reverse polarity. I'm not bringing little meter readings into, the home with me when I go through. There are things like that that are always going to pop up. And we just took the risk to do that. But it can really backfire. It's a very, like you said, it's terrifying. And I totally understand. And I think the agents out there understand. And I think we can never hear it enough that it's a difficult process for any buyer to go through, let alone a first-time home buyer. All right. So what has been, along those lines, what has been the most eye-opening part of this experience for the both of you going through the entire thing? What has been the most eye-opening thing? And Lawren, I'll start with you.
People's choices in wall color. It's shocking to me.
That's hilarious. And for those listening, that is such a Lawren answer, and that's why I love Lawren, because she cracks me up. No, I agree with you. There are some terrible decor choices out there.
I mean, wall color is really a lifestyle choice in some of these homes. What for you? What do you think?
The most eye-opening thing was truly just the state of the market and how competitive it is. And the seller right now has all the power. And us as buyers are just begging and pleading to be chosen. And we're just throwing everything we can at them with the little buying power that we have with the high interest rates. So it's like, and we're just trying to, and I mean, I don't know, the low inventory has also been extremely eye-opening. I think those are the two big things that really, really shocked me, were just that it does seem that in order to get a quality home, there's always going to be multiple offers, and that was shocking for me, and a little painful.
You're right. When a home first comes on the market, the leverage right now is with that seller, and we talk about that. And that leverage quickly shifts the more days that the home is on the market. But like you had both said, if a home doesn't get scooped up in the first couple of days, usually it's because it's way overpriced or there's some kind of big flaw with it that you're going to have to live with. Right now, there are a few that slip through the cracks. I went under contract with a buyer not too long ago where the home was just overpriced and just sat. And by the time that we got to it, it had been on for a little while and we were able to have a home inspection. But that's a rarity. And so, those opportunities don't come up every day. And, you both have clearly seen that throughout this process. And if you had to start the process all over again, knowing what you know now, what do you think you would do different in the process, maybe at the beginning that you didn't do at the beginning, knowing what you know now?
I would prepare myself for the long haul.
Yeah.
It is a long searching process, and you have to fight the fatigue of it because you have to be, looking every day. You just got to be ready for just how long this could possibly take, and really mentally prepare yourself and fortify yourself for that. And I think, obviously, looking back on some of our offers, we probably would have altered our inspections, but that's the big thing, to not kind of get away from the inspection thing is, I would just prepare myself for, how long and grueling and the ups and downs of this are, and just how many weekends you're going to have to sacrifice to go look at a house, right? That you wanted to go do something else, like a hike or something maybe. But then, on Thursday, a house pops up and you're like, well, that's going to be gone by Monday. So we have to see it this weekend.
Yeah. Timing is always, in real estate, we have a term, time is of the essence, right? There's never been a truer statement right now than that statement. Lawren, what do you think? Is there anything you would change knowing what you know now?
I think I would have emotionally prepared myself a little bit more, because it does take, it just takes a lot out of you. It is just like an emotionally exhausting process. And you're just, you're going through the process, you're learning a lot about yourself. You're learning a lot about what you want, what you don't want. You're learning a lot about what is available, things that we wanted that we're realizing are not available to us right now. But I wish I had taken the time to prepare myself, because it really is, it really does encompass a large part of our life. And that's something that, we are willing to do. But for someone who just is like going to jump in and just like, I think I want this now, like I really take the time to really make sure that you are ready to commit, because you can't do it 50%.
Yeah, we talk about that, right? About going all in on these things. Like there's really no half stepping in this market. And you both have seen it firsthand. You've gone through it. It's almost like you have the battle scars now of the market, right? And it is kind of a war of attrition. And I feel like sometime as your real estate agent, part of my job is to not let you get defeated, right? And not get too frustrated, because I know, I've seen this story before and I know it's going to work out, right? And sometimes you have to give optimism to your clients, because it's a slog, right? It's tough to go through. And I wish that I could give that to both of you and tell you that, it's all going to work out, and it will work out, and we're going to find the one. And I know we will. We're close, and I know I tell you all that all the time, but I really, truly do feel that way. I was talking to an agent today, and a very good agent, a very, very good agent, knows all the tricks and the stuff to do with offers and kind of how to work the angles and everything. And she was telling me a story today. She had a buyer that had put in 12 offers before they got a place. Now, I have no intention of putting in 12 offers with you before we get something accepted, but it just goes to show that, sometimes timing is everything. Sometimes luck is everything. Sometimes it's a combination of the two, right? And it just finds a way to find you, and we will find that one, right? So I want to thank you both for your candidness and your honesty during this whole process. I know this is maybe like a cathartic session for all of us. We're having, we should be lying on a couch, just talking to each other and psychoanalyzing each other at this point. But one last question that I have, and Jim had referenced this earlier a little bit. Do you think that we will ever find Lawren the crawl space of her dreams? Is what I want to know. Because I've made it my mission now to find her the flat out creepiest attic or basement space possible. And I want to do that before all is said and done. So do you think we will get there one day?
It's going to happen. It's going to happen. I have been avoiding it for a long time.
And just so the listeners know out there, every house that we go to that has like a crawl space or kind of like a creepy closet or attic space, Lauren's skin crawls before my eyes every time that she opens like an attic door. And just to see her reaction is absolutely priceless. So I just want to make sure that we get you what you want, Lawren,
I am looking for the crustiest, dustiest crawl space that you have.
Oh man. Well, this has obviously been a pleasure for me, and I can't thank you guys enough. I told you it took me a little while to work up the courage to invite you to come on here and kind of spill your story to everybody. And I want to thank you for doing this, because it is educational for all of us listening out there. So, I appreciate you both. I appreciate your time, and we are going to go out tomorrow night and we're going to see this house, and I hope that this is going to be the one. And, this whole podcast episode will become a moot point, maybe even next week. So thank you guys so much. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you so much. We've really enjoyed it, and we've hoped that we've helped, everybody listening, get a little insight.
That was the conversation with my very own first-time homebuyers, Jim and Lawren. I can't thank them enough for joining me this week, getting their unique perspective on their venture into buying a home in the current real estate market. Here are a couple takeaways that I had from Jim and Lawren. Number one, and I think the most important thing, is that we have empathy for buyers that are out there buying properties right now. It is not easy for people, especially being first-time home buyers, especially going through this process for the first time. I think as agents, we're out there doing this every single day, and we're used to it, right? But our clients are not used to this process. They are not used to seeing how competitive it is when they first start this process. So I think we need to do our best to prepare them, set the expectation on what they can expect out there, and make sure that they go into this process with their eyes wide open, right? So we have to do our best to prepare our clients for this process and do our best to empathize with where they are coming from, because it is terrifying. As Jim had said during the podcast, it is terrifying, especially for first-time home buyers out there getting into the real estate world and trying to purchase their first property. Number two, if you are on the listing side of things, Jim mentioned specifically the lack of transparency by certain listing agents that we have dealt with, unfortunately, on our end. And they maybe would have moved a little bit when it comes to making their offers, right? And as listing agents, you may be saying to yourself that are listening right now, well, they should have did better with their initial offer, right? That may be true, but if an agent doesn't specify that this is going to be a highest and best situation, then buyers may hold back a little bit. And then, if you only have one shot to get this home, buyers are left kind of wondering, well, we would have done a little better if the agent would have come back to us. Just as a general rule of thumb, for those of you that strictly do highest and best offers, if you have, say, 15 offers on a property, I get it. But if you negotiate a little bit further, it benefits not only your seller to see if a buyer will be willing to move up a little bit or do a little bit better in certain areas, but it also benefits the buyers, because in the end, maybe they would have moved a little bit more had you gone back to the buyer agent and had that discussion with them. And in the end, it would have been a win-win for all parties. I also want to mention the seller's disclosure, and I have seen recently a huge lack of disclosure when it comes to the seller's disclosure. And what we've seen out there, and my clients have seen, they are very analytical and they want to see the seller's disclosure properly filled out, because in the end, many buyers are waiving their home inspections, right? We never recommend that, but that's what they're doing. And the only recourse that they have is the seller's disclosure. And if it's not properly filled out, it's extremely difficult for a first-time home buyer to say, okay, we're going to waive our inspections based on what we see on the seller's disclosure or lack thereof, right? And so I think as listing agents, we need to be prepared to make sure that our sellers fill that out properly, because like we mentioned in the podcast, it may be a liability issue for the seller if it's not filled out properly. The buyers get into the home and suddenly there's a huge issue with water in the basement, or there's a structural issue that wasn't properly disclosed, and now that buyer wants to come back and sue your seller. Last but not least, communication. I think so much of what our buyers experience out there, on the negative side, can be dealt with better communication, whether it be from the listing agent to the buyer agent that then is communicated to the buyers, or it's between the buyer agent and your clients, right? We have to be there for them during this process because it is difficult, it is trying, and the more information that they have, the more clarity that we can give them through this process, the easier it's going to be, right? Because in the end, if they miss out on a few properties, the best thing that we can do is just communicate with them, let them know where they stand, let them know that we are there for them, and let them know that we are fighting on their behalf. So communicate with your buyers. Make sure that you keep in touch with them. I had a situation recently where I picked up a set of buyers because they were so unhappy with their last buyer agent that they would literally make an offer on a property and never hear back from their agent whether they got the house or not. And then 3 days later, they would say, well, I guess we didn't get it. That's how bad the communication was between their former buyer agent. And now they have come to me saying that, they would like me to represent them because of XYZ situation with their former agent. It's really embarrassing from our standpoint, and we can all do better in making sure that we are effectively communicating with our clients. Well, that's it for the podcast this week. We will be back in another couple of weeks with a new topic, a new guest, and as always, if you want to hear a topic that we haven't covered yet, please reach out to me, jason.ostrowski@foxroach.com. And if you haven't liked and subscribed to the podcast yet or left us a review, please do so. It helps us to reach more people. Once again, this is Jason Ostrowski saying stay safe out there, stay selling, and we'll catch you on the next episode of the Everything Real Estate Podcast.